Our subject today on the gift of prophecy is on directional prophecy, or if we might refer to it as guidance by prophecy. Some people, I think, maybe hit and miss a little bit on this and again take too much for granted as far as not weighing prophecy enough. I suppose I'm reminded of the humorous story of the young man who wanted to marry a girl called Grace. And he loved Grace beyond anything that this world could ever dream of. She was the essence of everything. And he prayed to God and he said, God, you know, I want to marry Grace, and would you give me a word to let me know that Grace is going to be mine? So he took his Bible and of course he opened it at random and he said, the Lord wants me to have Grace, because it says here, grace be unto you and God our Father. Well, we just don't want to take everything like this as a means of direction for our lives. But I do know that sometimes we can have a guidance or a prophecy, and it can be a directional prophecy, and we consider this, of course, the way that we should go, and it's directing people where to go and what to do. I get a little concerned sometimes about this type of prophecy. There was a young couple who had 5 small children, and they had been trained in the seminar that I had been trained in on the gifts of the Spirit. We were all very new in the things of God at this time, and of course everybody was wondering about ministries. Many of us didn't quite know where we were going or where we were at, and of course we were interested in doing the will of God. And I know that this particular young couple had really something in their hearts that they were desirous to please God. However, they received a prophecy. Now this prophecy came out of the blue. I've told you about prophecies or utterances that come that, you know, that you have nothing to go on, that they don't they're not fulfilled at this point, neither do they bear out with the inner witness of your spirit at that point. There's nothing that's sort of like a new thing. This was kind of a new thing to them. And it came that, surely saith the Lord, thou shalt go to the isles of the sea, and there the Spirit of God shall sweep before thee, and great wonders and signs shall be thy portion. And oh, I tell you, a great glowing prophecy of all the things that these people were going to do. Sell all that thou hast, saith God, and go to my people. Well, of course, this meant action. I mean, action. Tomorrow morning, we find a for sale sign outside on the lawn for their house. They have 5 little children, and the house sold. They took what little bit of money they had, and since they had an idea of where maybe God wanted them to go, why, they got on the plane and went to this particular spot, and waving bye-bye at the airport, so long, and everybody waved goodbye at the airport with them, and saying, God bless you, we'll be waiting for the news of all the wonderful things that God is doing under your hands. Bless God. Everything happened very quickly, so fast that it made your head swim. Well, the situation came up that we weren't getting all that much mail from them. Neither was there all that kind of a glowing report that we fully expected to receive. And we were all waiting in anticipation to hear some word of how God was sweeping in front of them by His Spirit. Instead, we were getting letters like, the children are very sick, and we are in need of medicine. We are running low of supplies. The government will not let my husband get employment because we do not have a proper visa or work order. They went on to continually state that really nothing was happening, and they were looking all over to try to find opportunities to minister and couldn't find even one hungry soul. You see, what had happened is this. Before they went out, they gave no thought whatsoever to what they were doing. Their word or their directional prophecy had not been weighed at all. No thought to, well, if they went out there, could they be supplied with work on a temporary basis until the ministry got rolling? No thought to whether there was any other kind of a work established there. There was just such a great glory and wonder to them getting up and going out to the field, you know. That's what they did. Do you know that within a matter of a very few months, and I would say 4, and I will make allowances and say possibly 5 months, but I know that it wasn't that long, they had to wire collect home and say, would you please send funds because we are completely broke, our children are sick, and we've got to come home. Well, of course, everybody in the church thought for sure they had failed God, you know. And really it was the other way around. I think the church had failed them. Without weighing properly the situation, without analyzing the prophecies and taking care that everything was in order to make sure that these people were okay in going out there. Now, do you know that particular thing really threw that couple? Because I think for quite some time, now I don't know where they are today, but I know for some time it was almost as if they had turned their back on the ministry. They turned their back on the things of God. They were so disillusioned. Their hearts were just torn. They thought, well, man, if that's God, you know, I don't want it. Well, it wasn't God. Now, there is a possibility it could have been that God could have spoken, and that was a true prophetic utterance, excepting they jumped the gun. They were the ones who went maybe ahead of God, and God maybe gave them that utterance, but maybe it was not to be fulfilled for a time later, after they had been tempered and trained and gone through the process of looking after everything and seeing that everything was in order. I think you're following me, aren't you? You're understanding what I'm saying? So let's again be careful of directional type of prophecy. I'm going to tell you a story of something for myself in the way of directional prophecy, because this to me is something to let us know that we can weigh what is born of God. It was at this very meeting that I was telling you about in, I think it was the last seminar, of the woman who prayed the prayer, and dear Lord, give Mary many, many, many souls, which I told you that one did not lay well with me at all. Now, another person who was a beautiful, and I would call her a prophetess, because indeed she had a special prophetic ministry, and whenever she began to prophesy, I perked up and listened, because I knew that God had really anointed her ministry. And part of the prophecy was this: yea, saith the Lord, I shall bring thee into one hard place. And yet saith the Lord, if thou shalt come before me and pray unto me, saith the Lord, I shall turn the way before you, and I shall open up the way, saith God, and my spirit shall move mightily. Well, at that time when I heard the prophecy, I thought, well, all right, I'll keep it. I'll put it in the back of my mind, since I haven't gone there yet and I don't know what hard places are there. And like Paul, you know, the prophecy that said, well, you know, whoever owns this girdle and it be bound around him, and whoever owns this is going to have trouble in Jerusalem. Well, there was that prophecy going to be one hard place, and I didn't stop to think about this and worry about it and think, oh my goodness, you know, there's going to be a hard place. Oh God, you know, if there's going to be a hard place, I don't even know if I want to go there or not. I didn't even think that. To me, it was just, I was very much at peace in my heart. So I forgot it. Never even thought about it again. We got into Malaysia and Singapore, and I've already told you at this point what God began to do. Do you know, right up the whole west coast of that area, God was moving by His Spirit in such a way that there was no hard places at all at this point. It was as though God Himself had moved by His Spirit, and a blanket of the Holy Spirit had fallen upon the people. People were coming way ahead of time, 2 and 3 and 4 hours early, sitting in the assembly, waiting to receive from God, because they didn't want to miss out, because there was only standing room only outside the doors and the windows. And the people that wanted to get seats came early, I mean early. And every time you came into one of those meetings, you could sense the presence of God. Oh my, I'll never forget it. I'll never forget it. They were sitting in expectancy on the edges of their seat. Every one of them were expecting to be healed. Am I going to be next? Am I going to be next? You could just sense this expectancy amongst them. And there were miracles, signs, and wonders. And there was no hard place at all at this point. It was so easy, in fact, it was like the fall of the walls of Jericho. All they did was walk around the walls. They didn't use any visible means of warfare at all. They didn't get the chariots and the spears and the swords. They used nothing of this nature. Nothing. All they did was walk around the walls and believe God. And that's about all we did. We did no advertising by television, by radio, by newspaper, nothing. It all went by word of mouth, and it was almost like there was no effort on our part whatsoever. It was something that God did. Well, right up the West Coast, when our last stop, we came down to Singapore. And we came into the meeting. The first meeting, of course, like all of the others, began in the convent halls. The first meeting started with about, I would say, 250 people. This is the way all of them started in each place, and it just seemed to grow very suddenly. However, we felt a different atmosphere there for some reason. It was almost as if people were kind of sitting in their seats with their arms folded saying, "Perform for me. I want to see what you can do." And I felt it was so hard to minister the gifts of the Spirit. Before in the other meetings, all you had to do was just enter right in. The move of the Spirit of God was so easy. Why revelation came so easy, and it was just so simple to minister the things of God. But there, it was like pulling teeth. I mean, you couldn't even get anything worked up, not even with any effort. I thought, God, what's wrong here? Well, we decided to have a meeting the next night. And the next night, if we had 300, we were fortunate. We weren't, now listen, I want you to understand, we weren't looking for crowds. We were looking for the move of the Spirit of God. And here, the meetings wouldn't get started till long about 8 o'clock, I guess. And then even by 8:30, people were still sort of straggling in. I would say that maybe a third of the convent hall was full of people. So you can imagine that the hall would have held around 800 people or somewhere in through there, if all of them had gotten in. So Sister Marie and I got together and we said, "Look, what's going on? How do you feel about this?" We started to compare notes. And she said, "Well, I don't feel too good about this." She says, "I wonder if we should even carry on with some of the meetings." Because she said, "We're just not sensing a move of God. And we're not just out to have meetings, for the sake of meetings. We don't need them. We got enough people playing church today." And I said, "Well, tell you what, let's have one more meeting. And then, what do you think? Do you suppose that maybe it might be a good idea if we went into the church?" She says, "Yeah, that sounds really great." Well, she says, the church holds 1,500 people. Now, we came to the end of that third meeting. Now, you talk about an act of faith. That was one, I think, that probably I bit off that I really wondered about at the time when I bit it off. Because we thought, we announced it then. That was the only group of people that we announced it to, the 350 that were there the third night. Again, we made no television, no radio, no newspaper advertisements of any kind. And that night we announced it to those 350 people, and we said, "Look, we've gotten permission from the Catholic priest, and we are going to go over into the church tomorrow night." That would have been our fourth night for the campaign, and we were due to have 5. Well, let me tell you, that afternoon I did some perspiring. It was not only hot in that country, it was in the tropics, but I'll tell you, it was right in the early afternoon, and those Malaysian rains began to fall, those tropical rains. Now, if you've ever been out there in one of those rains, you'll know it isn't like the kind of rains we have here. I know that we think oftentimes Noah's Ark and his time didn't have anything over on us, but I'll tell you, when it rains in sheets. You feel one drop of water get in under cover fast because it's just going to come down in torrents. It hits the tile roofs, and the windows and doors are all open because it's so hot. The breeze has got to blow through. They don't have anything on the windows, no windows at all. It's just bars. And the breeze blows through, and then when it hits the ground on the outside, it falls into gutters. And when you hear it falling, you can't hear anybody else talking in the room with you because there's just such a noise, and it falls in torrents. So I went into the little prayer room, and they have a little room off to the side. And so I went in there, and I tell you, I started praying in the Spirit. Believe me, I started meaning business with God. And you talk about praying in the Spirit. I prayed out loud. I knew that nobody would hear me because the rain was coming down so hard and in such torrents that above the claps of the thunder and the rain and everything, forget it, no one would hear a word I was saying. So I was just hooping it up. Oh boy, was I going to town. Now along about after an hour and a half to 2 hours of this praying in the Spirit, if you've never prayed in the Spirit that long, you don't know what you're missing. I'm telling you. There's great victories that come in people's lives when we do things like this. But you see, my heart was desperate. And finally, when I finished praying in the Spirit, I began to shout, hallelujah, praise the name of Jesus. Oh, bless God for the victory. And I didn't even know what victory I'd had at this point. That's a revelation that God gives you. You've got a victory for something. And the tears streaming down my cheeks, and I started to jump and leap and dance, and all of a sudden the prophecy came back to me. Yea, there shall be one hard place, saith the Lord, but yet, saith God, if thou shalt turn unto me and pray, so it shall be, saith the Lord, I shall give thee the victory, and I shall move by my Spirit. I said to myself, self, we have the victory. Oh, bless God. It was still raining in torrents by the time the evening meeting came. The church, as I said before, would hold 1,500. When I walked through that door that night, I said, my God, my God, my God, I don't know how you move by your Spirit. I don't know how you do anything. I give up every resource I ever have of my own. I give up everything that my reasoning, my intelligence. I give up anything that I would have any idea of doing by myself. Because, Lord, where these people came from is beyond me. They must have come out of the woodwork. I don't know where they came from. The place was packed to the doors. I said, God, how did you do it? Well, just like those rains that fall in the tropics, and the rains were coming down in torrents, the Spirit of God began to move in that place, and everybody stood to their feet and began to clap, thunderous claps, praising God and praising God. I said, oh God, the thing is broken. It's broken. You're going to move by your Spirit. And we felt now, for the first time in all of the 3 meetings, this is now the 4th one, we now felt the freedom of God in those meetings. And now we had liberty. Boy, I'll tell you, when it came time to minister the gifts of the Spirit, the revelation gifts and the power gifts, and people were being healed, one after another. Oh, bless God, one thing after another happened. Then the next night following that, the place was not only full to the doors, but they're standing out in the streets, out on the sidewalks, out on the road, and the police had to be there to help direct traffic. Well, again, the fulfillment of a word that even came out of my own mouth sometime prior to that, which was, what God is about to do, no church will hold it. So we can see so many of these things fitting into their proper place. And as we've been looking at this aspect of, quote, directional prophecy, sometimes God does give a directional word, and it is a specific word. In our next seminar, I'm going to give you a little article out of a book that I feel is a very important one, and I would like to read it to you because I think it's something that we need to be concerned about in this day and age where so many people are saying, the Lord said. If God said, then believe me, it's going to come to pass. We can even let the test of time prove it. And so the fulfillment of prophecy, as it comes to pass, says, yes, that is a true word from God because it was fulfilled, just as the one that I gave you the illustration of. Whether it's now or whether it's later, many prophetic utterances that I have received years ago, 20 years ago, are being fulfilled now. When I used to sit in the assembly We used to hear utterances, in your day I am going to move by my Spirit. Oh my, I'm going to have to go right now, and I'm going to have to tell you what that prophecy was in our next seminar. Will you come back and join us?